Group. I'm privileged here tonight to give you guys an update on the project. Actually very excited to give this update. You guys all have a pamphlet in front of you. Without a podium, it's kind of a little hard. So today we're going to give you guys an update on Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the construction project. I'd like to start with Phase 2 at the high school. A little contractor schedule and overview. The high school field project is ramping up, and as you can see, a lot of material is starting to come in. A lot different since the last time we've seen it a couple months ago. The site is fenced off and secured, and again, for the start of school, because the construction will continue through the beginning of the school year, we will reconfigure the fence, so it'll be modified, obviously, for the school year. You're going to get your parking lot back. They're actually working on the alternate parking lot in the middle of the island as we speak. And the plan is to not skip a beat, and you'll have it all back, the parking at least back for the school year. The track and tennis courts and the asphalt and the coating have all been stripped. As a matter of fact, everything out there has been demolished. The track, the rubber, the asphalt, everything's been stripped, and we're into the rebuilding phase as we speak. One of the first things we did, thank you, sir. Thank you. In the picture that we're gonna come up on, you're gonna see a retaining wall, but since then has been poured. It's one of the first things we have to do. It's right in front of the tennis court, between the tennis court and the parking lot. And the backfill has happened, and we're starting all the new utilities. So we have a brand new electrical service, brand new plumbing service that's going to be feeding the new fields. We just started that this week. So as you can see, if you turn the page in the first picture here, it's a little different out there today. Again, these pictures were taken last week, so you can actually see the progress that we've had just a little over a week, and what can take place out there. This is a level tennis court, and the retaining wall is not there, and since then we've poured that. Moving on to the next picture, there is the retaining wall that we're talking about. This is in the stages of rebar before they form and pour, and as we speak, this is completed and backfilled. On to the next picture, materials arriving on site. This is a very exciting day, of course, for us to see this truck show up with the materials. It's a very exciting time knowing that we're going to be able to start installing these things and working towards the time of completion. So I do have a little bit of bad news, unfortunately, and this is the only bad news I'm going to give all of you tonight, is that we are about 3 weeks behind schedule on the tennis courts itself, and I'll explain. So I know last time I did a presentation up here, we talked about procuring materials, things like that, some of the things that are uncontrollable in the market. So one of the things that we found out is there's a trench drain that divides the courts that kind of takes the water off the courts and sends it out into daylight. Keeps the court dry, it helps them last a little longer, things like that. So that under drain had a very long lead time on it. We're expecting it actually this week. Unfortunately, because it's underground, it's underneath the asphalt, it's one of the first things that you do. We really can't do too much out there until we install that trench drain. So we're going to do everything we can. We're going to work some extra hours. We're going to pull some Saturdays and try and get this thing back on track, and I feel like we will. So with that being said, once the asphalt goes down, unfortunately, there's a 2-week cure time, 2 to 3 week cure time on the asphalt. That's because fresh asphalt releases gases, and we have to wait for those gases to release out of the asphalt before we can put the coating on, which is the color and the striping and everything else that you see on the tennis courts. And the good news is once that coating's on, it'll be readily available within a day or two. So we are anticipating at the end of September, we're going to be able to turn these courts over to you. And like I said, I believe that's going to be the only bad news I give to you tonight. So any questions on the high school?
Sorry if I'm
no worries.
Not really a question for you, a question for Terry or Harvey. I assume we've worked with Jason and we have a plan in place to have our tennis team for 3 weeks, and yeah.
Yep. So we'll work through the logistics of that delay.
Yeah.
Yep.
No problem. So moving on to Lee Road. Lee Road was very exciting. This job we are extremely ahead of schedule. We weren't supposed to complete this until August 29th, and I can tell you today, we are 99% complete at Lee Road. The only thing left for us to do is to program the actual light switches, and we're just waiting for the gentleman to show up to program these light switches. And these light switches are special because they auto-dim, and that's why they have to be programmed. But all the ceiling work, the demo on that side of the school, all the new lighting has been successfully completed, demoed, all put back, and all the rooms have been cleaned, waxed, and all the furniture has been reinstalled back into those rooms. So very, very exciting there. We actually started a little bit of punch list. We had the electrical engineer down here last week to kind of take a look around. So that's real good news. On the exterior of the building, this was actually part of phase one, but I want to talk a little bit about it here at Lee Road. So we've all been in tight communication with Central Hudson, and if anybody knows how these utility companies work, they're very difficult. It's a need-to-know basis kind of thing. So we got all the underground service installed, all the parking lots patched, and we were waiting up until last week for them to install the new telephone pole so that we can complete the connections both at the pole and at the building. They showed up out of nowhere. I think Harvey was the one to let me know that there was a brand new pole in the parking lot without any communication from Central Hudson, and we proceeded to get right back on the project. So with any luck, we'll have that tied in, but unfortunately our hands are tied by Central Hudson to make the final connections. They're the ones that do that, and we're working with them every day to make sure that we can try and get the power into the building before school starts. Okay. If you go on to the first picture, showed you a little bit. Now this is what the room would look like once the ceilings and light fixtures have been demoed. As you can see, we protected everything inside that room with plastic, and everything that could be moved was moved out of the room. Moving on to the next picture. New ceiling grid installed. If you see the white lines in the ceiling and you see the wires hanging under the ceiling, this was just a progress of what it looks like when things start coming back. All the light wiring was brand new, back to the power panels, and the ceiling grid here in this picture. On to the next. This is what your brand new ceilings look like. Light fixtures are in. Again, this picture was taken it's a lot different today than it was when I took the picture to get this progress report done. But the furniture is back in these rooms, and all the floors are polished and waxed. All the protection was removed, and the furniture back in the room. On the outside of the building, new electrical service install. Again, this has all been backfilled and patched with asphalt in the parking lot today. But this is what it looked like when we installed it. This will be on the right-hand side of the school if you're facing Lee Road. Next picture over, you can see where the guys came in and they patched the parking lot over the trench. And that wraps up Lee Road. Any questions for Lee Road?
You said something to the effect of you're working to make sure power is in the building by the time school starts. So what is the probability or the chances that it wouldn't be there, and what is the escalation process to ensure it is there?
So we have reached out, even Harvey himself has reached out as the district representative to try and get Central Hudson to maybe say, hey, we're a school district, right? We try to use that leverage. That kids, this is different. We're not a warehouse. We're not a mechanic garage. Like, we need power in the building. And Harvey did reach out to them. They are trying to do everything they can. Like I said, they showed up and didn't even our communication has been great. We have email chains. We have phone records of all the communications that's happening daily, and they just showed up out of nowhere and installed the telephone pole. So I honestly can't answer that question. It's really in the hands of Central Hudson. We are doing everything we can. It's not going to affect your school as it is.
I was about to say there's power currently in the building.
I didn't mean to mislead you. Yeah.
So
I'm sorry.
it's just it's an issue of switching over from service A to service B.
That's correct. It's
But
an
service
upgrade
A-
to your service.
Service A is still active.
That is correct.
Yeah.
My apologies. I probably should have said that.
And it's
No, I heard the same thing Christine heard, and I was like, wait a second, we don't, yeah. So there is zero operational difficulty with the school right now. It is power. Students could be in the school. Everything would be functioning.
correct.
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
and furthermore, when they do the cutover, what we bought in the specs from the contractor is uninterrupted service. So they have to provide a power generator, which would probably be the size of a tractor trailer truck, to provide the power uninterrupted if Central Hudson is down more than a quick cutover.
So worst case scenario, if we have the two options, we can bring in a tractor trailer and we can power up your building, or we can wait for a break because the school will have to be shut down when we do the power over, and it takes about a week. So we'll make that decision, whatever's smartest for the school at the time. Does that make sense, or you have questions, or?
Just the switchover takes a week?
Takes about, because it's a lot of power coming in there. And
Okay, so it either has to happen before school starts or over a break.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Yep. But you'll have power.
It's not going to impact day-to-day
Does
school.
not impact day-to-day school,
Okay,
correct.
thanks.
Okay, so that's Lee Road, and again, our scheduled completion date was August 20th, so we are ahead of schedule on that project. All right, moving on to the middle school. Middle school, we had an abatement project of the locker rooms. It was a very intense abatement in there. They took just about all the demo out as ACM containing material. That has been completed. Demolition is complete inside the locker rooms. The new underground plumbing is starting, so all the plumbing that was originally there is all being rerouted. So your showers, your sinks, your toilets are all going to be in different locations. And all the shop drawings for mechanicals are in progress. So what shop drawings are once we got the room emptied, we go in there, and the mechanical guy actually set up a 3D scanner and does everything by 3D. So now they lay out all the ductwork, all the lighting. We're doing coordination, making sure everything fits and coordinates with each other. And we put that on a set of drawings. And we couldn't do that until the room was completely stripped and bare. It's very hard to do it with existing conditions. So that's in progress now. Starting at the first picture, this is pre-abatement, so if all of you remember what the locker rooms look like, we did remove a couple things in here in this picture, but this is basically what it looked like pre-demo, pre-abatement. Next picture is what it looked like post-abatement, where just about everything out of the room was removed, except for the ceilings, tile, the curbs, and light fixtures. Moving on to the next picture, you can see where demo was in progress. You can see a lot different, a lot of work. Ceilings are down, floor tiles coming up. And just another room from a different angle of what it looks like in there as well under demolition. I'm actually happy to report as well that we are on that project. Our demolition was slated to be completed on August 24th, and we've completed that as of today. So we're ahead of schedule. So I think that's great news. Any questions on the middle school?
I have one. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Just a quick question. When's the completion date for that, for those locker rooms?
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, I mean, the public doesn't have the pictures in front of us. We're talking just about that locker room right off the gym. Is the only, that's not usable now, but essentially that was unusable space before. It basically wasn't used. I mean, it was the same when I went to school there, and it was basically unusable then. So that's why we need to have capital projects and do improvements in our school district. But we're not losing anything in function in our school from what we had. Yeah, until it's done.
Substantial completion is March 3rd of 2025. All right, any other questions with the middle school? Okay. Willow Avenue. So now we're on to phase one. Basically, everything we just discussed was phase two. Phase one, last time I presented to you guys, I made a very strong promise that we would complete this project by the end of the summer. And I can stand here today and tell you that we will complete this project by the end of the summer. We are actually just working with the architect now, and in the next week and a half, we'll be doing punch list on that phase, which I think is great news. If anybody's been by the Willow Avenue and seen the beautiful loading dock, it looks great. What a great design, and I'm sure it'll function just as well. So on the interior of that building, Willow Avenue, is where a tremendous amount of work has taken place. You see the new asphalt just outside of the loading dock. We fixed all the storm drainage that was in the underneath that parking lot. I could tell you they were made out of cinder blocks. They were extremely old. The pipe was deteriorated. I don't know how it went that long, but you got brand new storm drainage, so it works wonderful now. All the interior doors, if you haven't seen it yet, all the stairwell doors, the double doors, and added doors within the hallways for fire code have all been installed, painted, hardware is complete. All the stair railings have been either adjusted, replaced with new in kind. The bathrooms have been completed. The new hallway from the main corridor to the auditorium is complete. And the phase 1 open items is complete or on track for completion by the end of the summer. So some of the things we're still doing today in Willow Avenue is a little bit of sanding, a little bit of painting. And there's a couple unforeseens that I'd like to talk about as well. And I know we talked about this in the past, but I'd like to give credit to some of the contractors out there as well, and some of the things we encounter during construction that we don't anticipate. So, and I want to tell you this story. So where the security guard used to sit is now a new bathroom, and it's a new hallway that connects the main corridor to the auditorium. Well, when we were drilling through for the new toilet roughing, we hit a beam below. So we opened up the ceiling below, which was plaster. We really didn't want to go in there and start making a mess, but we had to. So what we found out is that was an old shaft. And long story short, we had to go in there and install a brand new I-beam to support that floor. And it took about 3-4 weeks just to get the design, get the engineers in there, right? Look at everything, calculate everything, give us the design, order the material, and then get it installed. These are the types of unforeseens that we don't anticipate when we build these schedules, and then we go in these schools. And I can tell you, this happens more times than you would think of, especially in the older buildings. So that's one of the setbacks that we had this summer, and we were able to fix and accomplish, and everything looks great to date. So like I said, inside that building, I think we got a little bit of painting going on, and there is one window that was on a major back order that's scheduled to be here the 16th of August. So that will be replaced. I believe that's next week, next Friday. We're anticipating to be here. The following week, we'll get it installed, and then we can say that Willow Avenue will be officially complete. So some of the pictures here. The first one, you can see the new loading dock, complete here with the rolling door. Great color. The next picture is some of the new doors that we talked about. This one happens to be at the bottom of the stairwell. Next picture is the installation of the handrails. I believe we had to raise them for code compliance. Jim, I think it was? Okay. So this was a major undertaking in itself. As you know, there are a lot of stairs in that building. And the next picture is the new entry to the auditorium that we discussed a little while ago. On the right-hand side, you don't see it, but is the new bathroom and new storage closet. All right, and the next picture, so this is how difficult, I want to show you how tight and difficult. This was where we installed the steel beam. Unfortunately, I do not have a picture of them installing it, but this is what we had to do. This is below that bathroom. So we had to go out, rent scaffolding, install the scaffolding, tear down the ceiling, get it investigated by the engineers, and then perform the work that he suggested. Very tight space. And that's all I have for tonight's presentation. I have some time for Q&A if you have any.
Before I open the board, I just had one question, and this is, first of all, thank you very much for this presentation. You know, obviously much different situation last summer, and everybody's a lot happier about where we're at today. My question was on the Lee Road paving. I thought that was originally scheduled for this summer. We must have pushed it back to next summer. I can't remember. Is that on schedule for next summer?
That's correct. So we do have a phase 3.
Yeah.
Tetra Tech and Palumbo Group are actually working on that as we speak.
Got it.
We're expecting to go out to bid, I think, by the end of this month. We'll be on the street, and that's included in the package. Yep, sorry.
Perfect, yeah. And then the other, we have to go out and bid the COH for the windows and, yeah.
Yeah, it's all part of the same package.
Perfect. Just wanted to make sure that was still on the docket and hadn't, these schedules get complicated and convoluted. And certainly, I'm looking forward to an upcoming facilities committee meeting, and we'll really dig in to the meat of these issues. But, thank you for this update. I open the floor for questions, comments from board members.
Thank you very
All right, I'm not seeing anybody. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, the next agenda item here is public comments, recognition of visitors. Recognition of visitors for any item or agenda or for any other concern. The Board of Education welcomes comments from the public. Each person wishing to speak is asked to speak into the microphone, identify themselves, and respectively limit their comments to 3 minutes. 2 opportunities to speak are available, one at the beginning of the meeting and here at the end. The one in the beginning of the meeting we will limit to 30 minutes. The one at the end of the meeting will have no time limit. Each speaker may address the board only once at the opening and once in the closing portion of the agenda. Please remember there will be no cross dialogue between speakers and members of the board. All speakers are to conduct themselves in a civil manner. Obscene language, libelous statements, threats of violence, statements advocating racial, religious, or other forms of prejudice will not be tolerated. Persons wishing to discuss matters involving individual district personnel or students should present their comments and/or concerns to the superintendent during regular business hours. With that, I open the floor to anyone from the public out here who would like to make a comment.
Hi, I'm Leah Brickley. Can you hear? I'm sorry. Can I pull it out? Sorry. Already wasted a lot of my time. I promise. Hello? Sorry. Okay. I promise to try and limit it to 3 minutes. I'm a parent and an employee of the district, a substitute teacher. I am here because I had written to the Board of Education 30 days ago about a security issue with doors chronically being propped open at Lee Road. I got no response for about 20 days. I followed up and was told that it was kind of like I had not followed procedure. It was kind of a bureaucratic reason that I had not heard from anybody. And I became enraged and furious, righteously so. I really felt like I wasn't being heard and that this was a serious chronic issue. It has been, I just want the public to know that it's been a wild week. I have emailed all of the board members and the superintendent's office vigorously. I do feel as though I owe all of you an apology. I was very angry. I didn't insult anybody, but I was angry. And I will say that I met with 2 board members, gave me their time today, and they before I go there, I'm sorry, I just want to back up. I was righteously angry. I started talking to people in the community. And people in the community, people who were born and raised here, started warning me that speaking up negatively about against the district was not a good idea. that there could potentially be retribution against my son. And I have very good news for any parent out there who wants to speak their mind about what's going on in this school district and what's going on the board and what's going on in the superintendent's office, that you have the word from the superintendent's office that your child is treated any differently. And I have the word from the superintendent office. And believe it, and you need to start coming down here and you need to start talking because change needs to happen. 2 board members today to go over the security issues I had. They were they were attentive. They cared. Not only did they meet with me, thank you, I'm sorry. Not only did they meet with me, but they met with my son, a 7-year-old. And they let him talk to them. I'm nervous, I'm shaking, I'm sorry. I'm trying to stay grounded. They let him ask questions. He was really happy. He thought he was really special that he got to talk to the president and another board member. And they gave him his time. And he got to tell them what it's like not to win the principal's award ever. And what it feels like. He got to tell them what it feels like to be yelled at by a teacher, not a teacher, but a TA in front of everyone. They got to see a 7-year-old, look him in the eye, and feel it, and I know that they did. I was there, I saw it. They gave me, I feel much better about security. And also, I want to say to the parents, if you see propped exterior doors, it is not allowed. Tell someone and tell them to shut it. Okay? This doesn't take a grant. We can all do it. It is not worth the convenience. I am a grieving parent, okay? I picked my daughter's urn out at Quigley and Sullivan. You don't understand. It's not worth it. The doors need to stay shut. And I don't care if it's a special event. They need to stay shut. Okay? I want to thank the board members again. I want to say that you made a huge impression on my son. He walked away from that meeting feeling, what a special thing for him. I hope he always remembers that. And it made me realize that you need children in this process. You as board members need to be able to go into those schools unannounced, read a book to those students, sit with them at lunch. You need to see what's going on in your district. You shouldn't have to have them scheduled so principals can smile and usher you through. The children in the middle school and the high school should be here. Why is there not a subcommittee with students from the high school and the middle school? Tell me, why are you keeping children out of this process? That needs to change. There is a person in your office. I know I'm not allowed to identify anybody, but I will say this. Their email signature says, "We must prepare students for their world." What world are you living in? Have any of you spent time in any of our kindergarten classes? I have. They are a disaster, and it is shameful. Those teachers are drowning. These teachers, they need ENL yesterday. They need inclusion. They need to learn. Every general ed teacher is now a special ed teacher. Every general ed teacher needs to have training so that they have a special ed toolbox to deal with this new generation of children. And I don't know what world this person thinks these children are. Maybe back when they were principal, But this is a whole new ballgame. These are not millennials, okay? This is not Gen Z. This is Gen Alpha. Before I left my job at the Food Network for 15 years, I did marketing and research for food trends, which means that I follow generations. And I follow Gen Alpha, not only because it was my job, but because I have a son who's Gen Alpha. I would have had a daughter who is Gen Alpha too. And let me tell you something about this generation that I don't think anyone in this district understands. These children are a whole new being. It is wild. They are wonderful and they are wild. I have seen your kindergarten classes. I have seen desks being thrown over by students. I have seen students in altercations. I have seen students spit on each other. I have seen classrooms where there were 10 students that were disruptive because they needed special treatment. They were clearly neurodivergent. They were clearly suffering, and our teachers do not have the tools for it. Now, this is not the teacher's fault. It is certainly not the student's fault. They're wonderful. It's not their fault. And I mean, the parents can only do so much. It's somebody's fault. If you want to measure a district, you go into a kindergarten class, and that's how you measure a district. Our teachers need our help. You are not prepared for Generation Alpha. These children are born with screens in their faces, screens from the beginning. This is the first generation where technology is there. They are whizzes. Their brains work in ways that we will never understand. You ask someone from Generation Alpha what they want to be when they grow up, president or a YouTube influencer, they will tell you YouTube influencer. Mental health issues are off the charts. Neurodivergence is off the charts. And one board member mentioned to me that the standards for becoming a special ed teacher, you don't have to do your student teaching anymore. Like, teachers are coming into classrooms less prepared out of school. Why are we not giving our teachers professional development to help them? Okay? Generation Alpha is coming, winter is coming, and this district is not ready. And it needs to change, and parents need to get down here, and children need to get down here, and we need to start advocating for ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Anybody else?
All right. Should be quick. Unfortunately, well, I shouldn't say unfortunately. So I am a parent of a freshman tennis girl player who was very excited to be playing at the tennis courts in what I just calculated 14 days.
Sorry.
Victoria
Victor,
Halfpenny,
thank
sorry.
you. We know who you are.
I was trying to go
you.
fast, so you aren't here all night. But so I do hope there's a good contingency plan that is worked out, because as a working parent, I was kind of counting on her being here, and being told last minute, like the day before or the week before, isn't always conducive. So I am eagerly going to be looking at my email for those contingency plans that do not entail any less time on the courts, because our whole fall is sort of planned around her playing tennis. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else in the audience have anything to share in our public comment session? Please.
Hello. My name's Karina Hunter. I also have a child in the Lee Road School who's going into 3rd grade. To kind of piggyback off Aaliyah strictly on the security issue regarding the doors, it is a serious issue. I'm a parent who was part of the PTA last year. I'm a parent who's heavily involved in the school activities. During a week, I'm at the school at least 3-4 times. Almost every time those doors are unlocked and they are propped open, In Lee Road specifically, there are 2 sets of doors. The doors that are supposed to be locked and is in the parent handbook for 2023 to 2024, that front door is supposed to be locked 24/7 with no other entrance or exit for anybody. There are 3 security guards there that I know of that work there. I have seen multiple times, not a near one of them, look up as multiple people walk through that door and be very selective with who they choose to look up for and sign in, or they wait till they get down the hallway. And it is a very laissez-faire attitude towards security at that school. Again, I have friends in the community with children in Willow Ave and Cornwall and Hudson, and I know it is not the same there, and that the attitude with the security guards specifically is not the same. It has been brought up before, and to go in more to that, the front doors at Lee Road, as you all probably know, there are 2 sets of front main lock doors. If somebody comes in those first doors that are supposed to be locked, before any one of those security guards even looks, somebody could be in 2 kindergarten classrooms that are to the left. Anybody could walk in and hitch a left, and not any of those security guards would notice. I have brought up security issues with the principal, Mr. Armand, before, and again, with a very relaxed response. So just to, again, as a parent in the community, I don't know how we hold the security guards accountable for leaving those doors, again, unlocked and propped open. But yeah, I agree, and I've seen the lack of security at specifically that school, and I know it's not the same other places. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment. Do we have anybody else in the audience? Okay, thank you to everybody who joined us here for public comment. Again, there's no back and forth, but just a few, I'll just interject a few factual things. One, security is taken very seriously. I appreciate these concerns, and we will certainly look into them and make sure we do a better job of following our procedures. It is a multi-layered approach with security guards, sheriff's deputies, cameras, other means of detection. As a board, we have met with the sheriff's department, with local police. So it's something, in addition to additional physical measures of security, we've got a state grant. We'll be reconfiguring entrances in most of the schools. So I just want the public to be aware that as a board, that's something that we take very seriously. Always room for improvement, and we appreciate the comments in that regard. And would also like to say, Ms. Brickley, thank you for your comments about coming to speak at the board meeting. I think something that we shared in our meeting today is probably most of the board members have come and given a public comment because they had an issue before they became board members. And this board and all boards that I've been a part of welcome public comment, and we welcome the public to come join us at a meeting, or if a public forum is not your preferred way of getting that out there, we would appreciate if you email us. We'd be happy to help you if it's something that's in the board's purview, or to direct your traffic to the superintendent or local building administrator if that's the more, if that's the avenue that will get you a resolution to your issue. But that's, this board always wants to hear from our public and hear those concerns and make sure that the district is addressing them. The next item on our agenda are reports. We've got superintendent's goals and then board goals. So I will toss it over to Mr. Dade.
Thank you, Jim. So I sent the board my goals, and they're on board docs and key metrics. So goal number 1 centers around the engagement survey for 2024 and identifying key areas of growth for both the district and our 5 schools, and then demonstrating growth by the end of the school year when we administer the 2025 engagement survey. Goal number 2 is focused on continuing our efforts with the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusivity Committee. So this portion of the goal last year was really focused on development of the policy, which we did successfully in assembling a diverse group of stakeholders from across the district to provide me with feedback and information, the board with information and feedback to develop that policy. Phase 2 for this year is really getting around the action planning for addressing any barriers to diversity, equity, and inclusion in our district, centered around any identified areas from our parents and staff and students, and developing a plan for those, and updating the board as needed. And then goal number 3 is a switch from what I provided the board at the end of last year. Just based on the data that I reviewed from the last school year, I changed it from E&L to chronic absenteeism. So for a district like Cornwall, our chronic absenteeism rate hovers around 17%, which is not meeting anyone's expectations. I think it's something that we need to bring awareness and attention to. It's something that everyone needs to take a part in, from parents to students to staff, myself, to put some strategies in place to reverse the upward trend that we're seeing. Taking COVID out of the picture, there's an upward trend from pre-COVID to what I consider the 22-23 school year as our first semi back to normal. So I changed it to address chronic absenteeism as my 3rd goal. So just wanted to see if anyone had any questions, concerns on those goals.
I do. So thank you for providing the current absenteeism rate, so we can see that the goal is to reduce it down to 12%. Is there state or other funding tied to absenteeism? Is my first question. And then my second question would be, what do we do to ensure that students actually reside within the district boundaries and or are legitimately McKinney-Vento? Like, what steps do we take? I've heard concerns particularly from Lee Road School, and I'm just wondering what steps we take as a district.
So for point number 1, I actually went back and forth with the data and metric for that. Originally, I had the absenteeism rate and reduced it by 5%, but I felt that it was confusing, and Ms. Galliano confirmed that. The true goal intent is to take the number of students who are chronically absent and reduce that number of students by 5%. So it won't be a 17% to 12%. If that happens, I'll sign myself up for Superintendent of the Year. That will not happen in 1 year. So take the total number of students that are chronically absent and reduce it by 5% is the goal, but I will get the final numbers to the board. Second question was around funding. There's some grants and things of that nature that are around the state that we could apply for. I think we'll do that and get the ball moving from day one on some strategies and not try to wait for that funding to come through. And then number 3, it's not a Lee Road issue. Every single school in our district has been under investigation for students who may or may not reside in our boundaries. We have a distinct process in place where we'll send out confirmation of residency requests. So if someone has showed residency years back and we question it, we can have them prove their residence again. If we still question it, we have our security team conduct an investigation to make sure that head is on pillow at that residence to confirm the residency.
And just to follow up, what are regarding the McKinney-Vento students? I don't know, and I'm not asking you to provide the number as we sit here, but for students that are considered homeless, do we have a large population, a medium? I mean, in your professional estimate, and how do we ensure that they are, that is actually accurate?
Yeah, we have a very small number, especially compared to our colleagues around us in the county. There's a process where families must provide documentation, supporting documentation. They work with our People Personnel Services Department. There's someone designated in that office to know all the criteria that must be met. to meet McKinney-Vento status, but we have a very small population in our district.
I have a question. Thanks. Yeah, my question is regarding Goal 2, the CCSD DEI committee. There's a pledge to begin to implement a plan to ensure equitable access and opportunity in order to promote greater achievement for all students, all is all caps. What is the plan? What's the idea behind this plan, and kind of how would you imagine the plan looking like? And what's the method of implementation, if you want, of such a plan? Like the plan is going to be kind of like a document's going to sit somewhere, or how are you going to implement it? How I know there's further explanation under the title that it's going to be provided to the board for adoption. Let's say we adopt it. I mean, how are we going to go about it?
So the wording is taken directly from policy, so that's why you see the wording there with regards to improving academic outcomes for all students, not just any subgroup of students. So we worked hard on the wording of that portion of the policy. The plan is not simple, but it's simple to explain. If there's a particular subgroup, and I will take special education, I will take our E&L students where there's significant gaps in achievement, or there's disproportionality in suspension rates, or disproportionality with referrals to special education and things of that nature. If those rise up in the data from our parents and our staff and our students who are serving on the committee, then we'll investigate those further and see if there's strategies that we can put into place to address those disproportionalities, discrepancies, and things of that nature. So that's what the plan would look like, is identifying areas that could improve our district's overall outcomes for all students and put strategies in place to do such.
Great, thank you, Bass. Anybody else on the board? Any comments? Christian?
So this needs, for goal 3, I think needs further clarification about what we're talking about as chronically absent, and you said that there's still some ambiguity there that's going to be clarified, I'm sure, by the final goal. But what I'm concerned about is that, and how this interacts with a policy, in the sense that, we're adopting a drop rotation schedule, and just by eliminating, a class meeting, we're probably going to reduce the absenteeism rate. And particularly that chronically absent means how many students are above a particular threshold. The second thing about it is that I'm not sure about looking particularly at district information is going to be particularly informative about addressing the issue. And the reason is this, is that generally speaking, and I'm using ballpark numbers here, the chronic absenteeism rate in the country was about 10%, pretty much historically for a very long time. And what we've seen generally is it gone from about 10% to 20%, which is what people tend to be talking about. Which means if you look at our district, what you're going to see mostly is the 10% that we've known about, that is for reasons that we know about, some things that are not responsive to policy interventions, because they reflect things that are in life. They're not. So the point is, what you're going to see in our own data is things that have been there, and that is not necessarily the problem. Chronic absenteeism is something that's kind of happened in a lot of different districts. We might learn more by looking at it broader and look at the cause of that, and certainly there's more rigorous research on that to inform what we might do for the steps going ahead. On DEI, I'm just concerned about how this is, because we all know what the attendance was at the third meeting last year, so I'm wondering how the steering committee is going to be put together and how that's organizing, because after the policy was passed, there was a big drop-off in engagement. And so I kind of would like to see more detail about how we are picking the steering committee and what issues they're over, considering, there are board members there reporting, about 20% of the meeting was board members who were there, and that's going to report to the board. Just seems like we need to maybe think about how we are going to engage and how that whatever policies or feedback is actually coming from the community, as opposed to documents and things that are coming really top down. And then lastly, on goal 1, I just think that the choice of areas to grow is really the prerogative of the board. All our language on policy is that, the goals and the targets are set by the board, and I think the board has the competence to look at the data, to discuss it, and identify what we think are the priorities that need to be focused at. And I think that that is a process that I think should occur before that this happens by people who are elected versus people that are in a sense in the administration of the school. So I think that this can be either better designed to interact with what action the board might take in the strategic planning committee, our own discussion of the engagement survey that was going to happen in June, and that should kind of in a sense shape this as well.
All right, so I'll take that point by point. So chronic absenteeism is defined by New York State and pretty much federal regulations as missing 10% or more of the school year. So that's an easy definition for everyone to wrap their head around. So chronically absent, once you are more than 10% absent from school. I agree with Christian. We're not limiting research to our own district. I'm very collaborative with my colleagues in Orange County BOCES and in other areas of the other states that I've worked in to address that rate. So I think that answers that piece. With the DEI committee, I'm implementing policy. That's the role of the superintendent. The policy was approved by the Board of Education. It was supported by a robust DEI committee that provided ample feedback to inform the board of next steps. The meeting that Christian's referring to happened extremely late in the year, so attendance was sparse. But the next steps identified, we sent information out to the whole committee that was there at the beginning, which was in excess of 60 people, and asked them for their interest in serving on either the steering committee, being a part of a subcommittee, or volunteering their time in some other form or fashion. So we still engaged with that robust DEI committee that showed up for the first 2 meetings, not the June meeting, which was really late in everyone's schedules. So that's, for 2, it's really important. That is my function as superintendent, is to implement policy. The policy states that the DEI committee will provide me with feedback to develop a plan to ensure equity and opportunity for all students, and that's what Goal 2 is centered around. For Goal 1, I think that there's kind of a good way to make both happen. The interaction with schools is my responsibility. That's identifying targets for each individual school it really is my wheelhouse, and identifying those areas with our administration who are stellar to dive through the data and identify those areas of growth is, I feel like, in my lane. To Christian's point, if the board wants to determine the 3 focus areas for the district, absolutely. I'm just trying to capture all of it in the goal. Who comes up with those 3 areas for the district makes no matter to me, but at the school level, that's absolutely, I believe, my frequent interactions with the schools, with our administration, with our teachers and staff, to really dive into what those data points mean, unpacking what reasons might be, interaction with our students to learn more about why they may have answered particular survey questions in a particular way. So again, for goal number 1, if the board wants to provide that direction for the district of those 3 focus areas, absolutely. But at the school level, I'm not sure the board would have the time nor the ability to follow up like me and my team would to ensure that we're making progress by the 2025 engagement survey administration.
Thank you. Any other board members' comments? Oh, hold on. I think we've got a remote participation here. Technology, here we go. All right, Brendan, let's see if this works. Go ahead, Brendan.
Okay, are you getting any of the volume?
Yes.
Are you getting any volume from me at all?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a significant delay, so I'll just start, I'll start going. So Terry, just about goal number 3. I'm just wondering how you see the key results working with regards to the schedule, because it seems like one will influence the other. Like key result 1 will have to be achieved before, you'll have to analyze the district's chronic absentee rate before you work in collaboration with school buildings, before you, come up with strategies to reduce it. So I'm wondering if you've thought about what that cadence will be, and will we be able to track your progress, I guess, along the each of those touch points? Thank you, Brendan.
In case anyone didn't hear, kind of the cadence of how this will be tracked over the course of the year. We have an admin retreat on August 26th. At that retreat, we'll be diving into the chronic absenteeism rate for the district and looking at trends over time. And then each of our schools will be diving into their own data to look at trends in the data and beginning those efforts to develop action plans to address chronic absenteeism for their school. And then I'll set up touch points throughout the year. So at the end of each quarter, getting a sense of where we are with chronic absenteeism rates. There are some schools that are already engaging in these efforts. So while you can't calculate an absolute end-of-year chronic absenteeism rate, at the end of first quarter, you can see who's trending towards being chronically absent by the end of the year. So let's say by the end of the first quarter, a student in second grade already has 5 absences. They would be on our alert list for we need to have some kind of intervention here, or this student will definitely be chronically absent by the end of the year. There's also those students who we can tell the story of why they were absent 5 days and look at trends. This is a student who's always here, but they had a family trip, which resulted in these 5 absences. So there's a story behind all of them, but that's how I see it playing out, Brendan, as those touch points throughout the year. You all meet with me mid-year, and at that point, that would be a great opportunity to kind of see where we are as a district, what the numbers are looking like, and where we're trending for those rates.
Just add one thing to just this discussion generally that it always seems to warrant explanation, that the superintendent goals are representative of the unique goals for this year, and they're not the only 3 things that you will be focusing on, that these are on top of the normal duties and annual goals of a superintendent, which is to optimize the achievement of the school district. I know that sometimes that comes up in board discussion, sometimes that comes up in public discussion, but it seems always worth pointing out.
Thank you, Brendan, for that comment. Yeah, I'll just, I think everybody in the audience can hear you, but just to echo that standpoint, these are specific goals and areas for improvement for the year, and we can walk and chew gum at the same time, and that does not mean that we will lose sight of operating the district. Any other members who have yet to comment, who'd like to comments, questions? Okay, I am not seeing anything here. It seems like we had a couple different issues. I didn't hear anything in here that would actually be a showstopper. I think some of the questions in terms of the metrics on chronically absent, you know, we said you said that's a state mandated term, meaning 10%, so I don't know that that necessarily needs to be reworded. I'm kind of think that this is ripe for a vote right now. We didn't really have a consensus here of honing in on one issue that we'd like to see change. So, Christian, you have a comment?
I don't think this is ready for a vote. I mean, if we can, I can go on that, explain why I think that is, but this is not an action item, and I think if it was an action item, there would have been a chance for public comment before there was a final vote. So I don't think that today is the day that we should have a final vote on these.
So I've expressed this in the past. I worked with the board to preview as much as possible goals ahead of time. So the board first saw at least goal number 1 and 2, or heard where I was going with those goals back at the end of last school year. Sent them out to the board as well so that they could get their eyes on these goals. And just for the public and for new board members, what we didn't want to happen is I'm responsible for making sure our administrators, teachers, and staff members are ready to rock and roll from day one, and they can't be waiting to hear what the goals of the district are. So I want to make sure I'm providing direction for the district and not hindering that progress. So the shift was made to kind of forecast as much as possible early, and that's what we did.
Jim?
Mr. President, if I may.
Yeah, please.
I would support voting on this item this evening. I have confidence in the superintendent and administration giving the board updates anytime we have questions, issues, concerns regarding these superintendent goals. Therefore, I would make a motion to approve the goals.
Yeah, thank you for that. Christian, I'm sorry, did you have an additional comment? Did I see a hand there?
It was a common response to the superintendent, but the motion has been made.
Okay.
So I think we are in a different phase. The motion's been made, and I think that we're going to do a second, and if there's going to be discussion on the motion, we can have the discussion then.
Okay, would anybody like to second Tiffany's motion to have a vote on these superintendent goals? Second. We have a second from Christine. Any discussion on voting for the goals, since I guess we had a discussion on the goals? Christian.
So I think the first thing is that there's no urgency to pass the goals at this time. You can look at when these are passed through any of the districts, the 90 districts in the Hudson Valley. They're passed as late as November. These districts have really nothing, they don't ill fare because the goals aren't passed on time. These goals are not necessarily affecting the operational things of the district because, well, if we wait a month or a month and a half to choose what the 3 are, or even have the first DEI meeting, or look at chronic absenteeism, I don't think that changes what I do as a teacher because I still want students in my classroom whether or not there's a chronic absenteeism goal or not. I think that the goals have things that need to be worked on, and that came out in the discussion, not from me. And I think that means that we should give it time. And I think when it wasn't put on the agenda as an action item, it shouldn't be an item that should be acted on during that meeting when it's put on the agenda as a report. Last year we had, let's say, someone making an action item for an RFP for the district's council. And I think there was a general agreement on the board at the time that that was not the right and time and place to do that. And I think that that gives the public a chance to understand what's happening and that we don't take action prematurely, especially when there is no evident downside. So that would be my argument for not taking a vote tonight.
That's fair. Thank you for your thoughts. I will counter that by saying, is the district going to stop to function if we don't take a vote on this tonight? No, it certainly is not. In past years, in all of my experience on the board so far, this has been an issue that's just dragged. Last year, I think we approved these in October. I wouldn't say that it's impeded the board's function, but I would say it's hindered the board from function optionally. There's business to be had and to be done, and if we can have that business and move on with it, I think that's a positive thing. To your point about it not being an action item, it's on the agenda. The board goals were listed up on Board Doc for public review last week. If you want to take issue with the heading of reports versus new business consent agenda, as that being somewhat confusing, I guess, Terry and I will take responsibility for that. When Christine and Terry and I met to set the agenda, that was really more about just staging the meeting and what order we wanted to tackle things. And in emails, the next topic is board goals, and so, multiple emails to the board. I said, hey, these might be ripe for a vote this week. They might not be, depending on how the discussion goes. So, following that same logic, I think this may be ripe. Same logic applies. This may be ripe for a vote or may not be ripe for a vote, depending on how the discussion goes. In my mind, it was ripe for a vote. We have a motion and a second. If you would like to vote no on the vote, with your reason being, I don't think it's ready and they need improvement, you're perfectly within your purview to do so. And if the vote does not get 5 yeses, then we will have to change the goals and come back to it again. So I think the current plan right now is we'll take a vote here in a minute. If anybody else would like to comment before we do so.
I have a comment here.
Yes.
Thanks, yeah. I just like to remind, the board that the discussion on working on the goals, be it superintendent goals or the board goals, should start earlier this year than we used to. You just mentioned that, like we used to delay it till October, November, which is good. I agree with that. But during that, when an email was sent out, I commented by saying that the way I like to see the goals, I like to see the board goals more like an umbrella under which you can put the goals of the
Can I ask you to hold
superintendent.
comments? Board goals is the next topic we're discussing. So if I could
No,
ask-
but we're still talking about the superintendent goals. So I'm giving you an introduction to ask my question.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. My question is for Terry and you as the board president. Was there any effort to work kind of together to make sure that the board goals encompass, if you want, the superintendent goals? In other words, the superintendent goals don't mention anything that the board is not seeing as, worthy goals to pursue.
Yeah, no, I think your comment is what's the upper level document driving board goals, superintendent goals. I've been a vocal critic of the process since I've joined the board, and I think we've all agreed that we need strategic planning as a district to drive that process, and this year sort of an interim step there. And when we get into board goals, you'll see board goal number 1 is to work on a strategic planning process. So I think until we undertake that process, I don't think we're going to get to the optimal state. So this is the state that we're at right now, is how I view it.
Okay, I'm okay, thanks.
And for my part, I've been paying attention to the board's conversation with regards to the board's goals. Jim has been very good about putting them up for board and our admin to see. And I've made sure that there's nothing in contrast with regards to where the board is going around strategic plan, facilities, and academic achievement. Those are directly what I feel like is a great umbrella for the superintendent's goals.
Christian.
So first of all, we don't have superintendent's goals, we have district goals, and that's very clear in the language of all of our policies and the description of them in the context of our policies. And it's very clear that the board sets the district goals as it's supposed to happen. If the board chooses to defer to the priorities that the superintendent wants to do, then that's obviously our prerogative, but they are the district goals, and that's why there should be more discussion about them. We got the language of these goals, as was mentioned, until Friday. We might have thought that there was an E&L, and we only knew a general area, we didn't know any language, we didn't know key results. There's a lot more that could be said about this. And the point about that means the board should take responsibility for one of their main tasks, which is laying out the priorities and the values of the district, which is then implemented by the administration. And that's clear in our policies. And it's clear in the language of our policies and the language in education law and the language of policies throughout this, the region and the state.
Thank you. Any other comments before we take a vote? Okay, can I get everybody any ayes? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Brendan is an aye. So we have 7 ayes. Nays? Christian, 1 nay. Anybody, I guess there's no abstention because that is all 8 members. So let's just record that as an approval of the superintendent goals document for 24-25 by a vote of 7-1. Thank you. Moving on to the next topic on our agenda, which would be the board goals for the 24-25 school year. Again, we really kicked off this discussion in the June meeting. We had a more robust document at that June meeting. It has since been tweaked, revising minor revisions to what we had in June. If I can pull up, can I steal your paper? Of course. Yeah, thanks. So I won't read the whole document for the public. It is available on board docs, but the number one overarching goal is a CCSD strategic plan. The Board of Education is committed to long-range planning to build upon the strengths of our district. So we're going to review the climate survey that we did, complete an RFP process to determine feasibility for strategic plan and make a decision if we want to go through with that or not, and then updates as needed. I will add that an RFP went out a few weeks ago to 4 respondents?
We have, what, 5 respond?
Yeah, so 5 different groups have been contacted there. Goal number 2, facilities improvement. Again, piggybacking on the presentation we made here, it's obviously important that we have clean, safe, and well-maintained facilities for all of our students and staff. And goal number 3, student achievement, partnering with superintendent to review math and data assessments at the elementary and middle school levels, regents exams. It says the Board of Education is committed to maximizing the performance of all students, providing the resources needed for an excellent education while staying focused on their social and emotional needs. And I guess another key point I'll highlight there is, continuing our UPK program and continuing to evaluate that. Do we need to add more seats and make sure we're providing the needs of the district there? So I guess I will open the floor to any comments on the board goals as drafted and on board docs now and as emailed to the board last week. Bass.
Thanks, Jim. I have a question on goal number 1. 4 times you say we will, like they sound mutually exclusive, and you go to the second one, we say complete the RFP process. It doesn't say what kind of RFP, what does RFP refer to. So just kind of for more to be more informational for anybody who looks at the document, understands what we're talking about.
Sure, it's referring, that's a bullet referring up to this strategic plan. So it's an RFP to providers, to third-party providers who provide assistance in having districts craft overall strategic plans. Sure. Right. Yeah, is your mic on? Yeah, sorry. I can hear you, but they can't hear you. The 8 people on YouTube can't hear you if your mic's not on. Yeah.
So you just want us to say something like, complete the RF process to select a partner for the purpose of strategic planning.
Spell it out what the RFP refers to for the outside, for the community. If they read the document, they understand what.
We can do that. That's easy enough,
Great, thank you, Bass. Any other comments from the board?
I have one.
Christine?
No, go ahead.
Okay. Richard?
Thank you. So overall, I thank everybody for putting this together in a timely manner. The only thing I'll say is, I know at the June meeting, I proposed a goal focusing on special education. Personally, as a board member, I think this is something that still should be included. So we make sure all students, including those in our special education programs, receive high-quality, inclusive education. I know a couple people mentioned, the goal I proposed might be a little too specific to start, had too many steps. So I think maybe starting with assessing our program, creating a baseline, figuring out where we are. I just think it's important. That's what I hear from people in the community as well. Just want to throw that out there.
Thank you, Richard. I'm going to actually defer to Christine here. As we were finalizing that draft and reviewing board members' comments from June, we had sort of we had a robust discussion about that and that language, and she wants to comment on that, so I'm going to defer to her here.
So for the sake of reminding everybody, I am very passionate about our special ed program. And for members of the audience, I can assure you that when you are critical of a program and hold people accountable, your children are not retaliated against, because I was one of those people, specifically around the topic of special education. So I just want to say that in the context of, I don't think the details that were proposed are appropriate for board goals. Some of those things were, things that we just wouldn't have access to because it's confidential information. So in working with Jim, my recommendation was that we provide this language around prioritize student needs with a focus on providing appropriate resources. And I think, Richard, that if we decided in order to fulfill that goal, we needed to assess our special ed program, that could be an action item under that, right? At least from my perspective. And then the last one around supporting administration and professional development programs that cultivate ongoing learning, et cetera, so that our skilled teaching staff meets the needs of all levels of learners using research-based programs. So it's not just about the special ed program, but of course, if we're finding and hearing that that's an area that is an extreme pain point, we can dive into that deeper, and it's covered by this umbrella, versus holding us to a goal that just legally we couldn't fulfill because of the laws and other things around special education.
May add to that, Christine, we kind of were trying to come up with language back and forth that included special education and appropriate supports, and every time that we added it in, it was like, well, wait a second, now you're ignoring all your other students, right? And the counter will be, what about gifted and talented students? What about students that are not special education or gifted and talented, right? So we thought it was best to leave that more open-ended with the knowledge that that's an area for the board. I think really dovetails with the discussion we just had on superintendent's goals, where he said, hey, areas for DEI for improving inclusion would be if we have a disparity with special education, that's something we need to look at and improve that. So that's just sort of how we felt about it, just to provide you more color on that. Not that it was not included or ignored, just we couldn't find the right way to work the language in. Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, I mean, as long as we focus on it and it's in our minds, because I do know that it's important for me, it's important to a lot of people. I think we can always do better. And yeah, as long as we keep that in mind. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Tiffany.
Just a quick question. When is that 2024 climate survey available?
So it got finished in June, and Terry and Christine and I talked about it in our agenda meeting last week. We've had the survey data is available. Just with summer and vacations, we've had a little difficulty chasing down the vendor to nail down a time we're going to get a presentation, but we're trying to organize that as soon as possible. Right before you were on the board, past President John Edelin sent out some information on it last June. So let's dig that up and make sure that you and Eleonora have access to that.
That's wonderful, thank you. I do recall being present at that June meeting, and I remember Christine, I think it was, specifically asking for a summary, so I was wondering when we might have that.
Yeah, so sorry, that's one of those, when a new term begins, you forget who had access to what, so we'll make sure that that email gets forwarded to you and Eleonora, so you have the information that all the other board members have, yeah. Comments from anybody else on board goals? Brendan, did I see a hand raise? Okay, we've got a hand raise from Brendan here.
Jim?
Yes.
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes.
Yes. So I appreciate the explanation, Christine's explanation in response to Richard's question. It's always helpful to hear the context and the thinking behind the actual language so that we as a board understand what's covered. I think ultimately the words on the paper are obviously very important, but it's also equally important that we are all on the same page as to what they mean. Now, the one thing that I want to suggest is something that we have spoken about. I know we talked about it last year, and it's probably come up in years before. As we go throughout the year, trying to track actions by the board or presentations that the board receives to a specific goal. So when we get a presentation or some information regarding special ed in the case that Richard was pointing out to, I think it's just helpful for us to always point to the specific goal that the board goal that is fulfilling, so that we have a better sense of the progress that we're making. Because oftentimes we work on these board goals and then they become a bit disconnected from the monthly operation of the board. So as we go, I think that's part. It's probably going to be partly your job, partly Christine's job to remind us when those things are relevant to the actions on the agenda. But I think that's something that we should try to stick to as much as possible this year, because I think that will be a helpful way for us to track our own progress.
Thanks, Brendan. That's a great suggestion, and Christine and I will certainly try to work on that. And anytime anybody else on the board wants to connect those dots and say we're doing a great job as a board, I'm sure we'd all appreciate to pat ourselves on the back if we're doing a good job. But yeah, no, that's a good comment that it is important when we're doing the work to tie that back to a board goal. I'll add to that. I don't think we did, was it last year or the first year that we did a board self-evaluation is something that we're supposed to be done and was newly implemented out of last year, the year before. So always areas for improvement there. Any other board members with a comment on board goals? Okay, I guess I will ask then for a motion to vote. To Bass's point, actually, we'll update the document, but we'll just make one change here under strategic plan, the second bullet point. We will complete the RFP for selecting
That was just my shorthand.
for selecting an external partner for planning services. Is that good? Yeah. So we'll update that language and we'll update the document, but I think with that, just that minor change, I would like a motion to vote to adopt these goals.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion from Christine, a second?
I'll second.
Okay, anybody, all the aye votes? Brendan?
Aye.
Oh, and I will vote aye, so we have 7 ayes. Nay votes? Abstention? And 1 abstention from Christian. So that motion has passed 7-0 to 1. Thank you for that. Now we can move on to the next part of our agenda, which is the President's update. What I was really going to cover in the President's update was just a quick update on the RFP process, which we just covered. And I don't really have anything else to add at this time. That was the big thing I wanted to cover, and I wanted to just state the 2 things that I said at the tail end of public comments there, in terms of security and welcoming comments from the public. So we will call that finished. We'll call that maybe the briefest President's update in history, and we will move on to the consent agenda. Use of the consent agenda permits the Board of Education to make more effective use of its time by adopting a single motion to cover those relatively routine matters which are included. rest as per document. We have this month numbers 1 through 16. Who would like to pull any of the items 1 through 16 out for discussion? Brendan, do you have anything to pull? You want to?
John,
Jim?
Brendan,
I'd like to
behind.
pull number 14.
Okay. Brendan signaling he doesn't have anything to pull. Bass, sorry, did I hear? Do you have an item you'd like
yeah,
to?
I'm not sure about the number. Might be number 3, the personnel action, but I can tell you what my question is. It's about
Okay.
substitute teachers, substitute teaching assistant.
Okay.
Should be number 3, right?
Number
Personnel?
3. Okay. And I would like to pull number
3.
15 myself personally. Anybody else? Okay, then can I get a motion to vote to approve items 1 and 2, numbers 4 through 13, and number 16?
So moved?
We have motion and a second. Ayes?
Aye.
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 Brendan on tape delay says aye. That would be a vote of 8-0 on the ayes. We will take the items that have been pulled out in order. So we'll go to Bass for number 3. I guess actually, so let's, how do we always, this is the part we always get. So let's take a motion on this item. So motion for item number 3.
I move.
Okay, motion and a second. Discussion, Bass.
Thanks. Yeah, my question is very simple. When it comes to appointments, appointing substitute teachers, substitute teacher assistant, and non-instructional substitute, I can't talk tonight, non-instructional substitute appointments. My question is, for these 3 categories, what kind of vetting are we doing?
Terry, was it? Brent?
Sure, I can answer that, sure. So certainly for our substitute certificated and uncertificated teachers as well as teaching assistants, they apply through OLAS. Traditionally, I dedicate 2 days in the summer, a day in the fall, a day in the spring, where we call in substitutes, and then there's more or less a rolling period that occurs if individuals reach out directly. So they go through the same vetting process in terms of submitting a resume, references being checked, transcripts being submitted. As far as non-instructional substitutes, similar in that they complete a civil service application, they do submit a resume, they meet with me, and references are checked as well. And of course, fingerprints. So everyone's fingerprints are cleared prior to going on the board agenda.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's take a vote. Aye. We've got 7. We're waiting on the tape delay here for Brendan.
Aye.
Okay, we have 8 ayes, so that motion carries 8-0. Now on to item 14, Cabinet 2425 Contract Resolution. Can I have a motion? So moved. A second? A second. Discussion, Christian. Is your mic on?
Now it is. So my basic issue with this is that what is the need to pass this, and what is the need to consolidate a contract that is relatively, I don't see any advantage to the district, and I see potential downsides to the district. I think that 2 years ago, the board decided to make a 2-year contract, okay, including 3 people who were not returning, and only 4 members who are currently on the board. And basically deprived last year's board from negotiating a contract, talking about the terms, basing it upon the evaluation, et cetera. I see no reason to open up the contract or consolidate the contract. I think the contract, if the terms are equivalent, is equally enforced now, and I don't see any upside and some potential downsides. And I think that given that we're having a contract recommended by people who this contract basically covers, and we get this contract on Friday, that is not enough time, and I think we should have at least some type of legal advice or review or time to have done that before we are taking action on that. And since I do not think this has any negative impact on the people covered, I think tabling this to the September meeting would probably be the most prudent course forward.
If I may, this actually came from advice from legal counsel. It doesn't change the terms of anybody's contract, as you correctly state. It was voted upon 2 years ago for a 2-year contract, so we're not changing or updating any terms. This is really just a housekeeping item to update dates. So this item actually came from advice of counsel.
Could we have provided the advice of counsel on the reason for this and why the council thinks that there's an upside to consolidating a contract and reopening a contract, meaning requiring a new ratification of the contract? And It would be nice to have seen the basis for that legal opinion.
Sure. So we're not reopening the contract. It's just we're voting on an addendum to that contract, updating the dates. Certainly happy to pass along council's advice on this subject. I would say that this has been, duly added to the agenda last week. I can't produce an opinion from council right now. Had a request come across, Friday or possibly even as late as this morning, we certainly could have reached out to Mr. Honeywell for a note that could have been passed along to the Board of Ed, but obviously I can't produce that at this moment.
May I also
please.
add, if I may, any opinion of council should be discussed in executive session?
Any other comments on this?
Agree. Mr. Galliano, I think what I was saying is that my reservations are that we don't have that for the action of this item that's before us right now, and I agree with how it should be done.
It's my understanding this isn't changing anything about the contract. It is not changing any dates. It is not changing any prior agreements. We're simply taking the main contract that was in place originally and the 3 addendums that have taken place since the original and consolidating them into one document so that we're not opening 3 documents to see the most current agreed upon contract. So there's no, in my understanding, there is no change, there's no date change. This is simply a housekeeping, as Jim had said. Certainly, if there was any change to contract, then it would require more time, more talk, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not sure what the downside is to just consolidating a document.
And this is the practice that we have in place with the CCTA, with our administrator groups. All of our collective bargaining units undergo various MOAs, stipulation agreements over the course of the year, and our legal counsel consolidates them so that we're all operating with one contract, because it gets quite confusing to say, well, what about the MOA from X year? So that's just been kind of our standard practice for the district, is over time making sure that we consolidate all of those addendums and MOAs into one document.
Comments, any other board member, or questions from any other board members? Christian?
I mean, no downside, also no upside. So the question is, what action? But here's the thing, there are 3 or 4 addendas? Are we being paid? Are we paying by the pixel, or do you have a difficulty of opening up more than one attachment or fewer attachments than are typically attached? There doesn't seem to be purpose for this, so that's why I would like to know why the council. I don't see that there's an advantage to a legal document simply because it is in one PDF file versus 3 PDF files, and I think that makes me want to ask questions, and therefore I think it would be prudent to have, the discussion, an executive session with an opinion.
That's fair. I appreciate your
Or
opinion.
rationale rather than opinion.
Sure. I appreciate your opinion. I will reiterate that this has been duly on the agenda and has not been raised until now, so there has not been an opportunity to do that. This item has been moved and seconded, so we will now take a vote. If enough of the board members agree and vote no for this action, then we will have to get an opinion from the council and revisit this next meeting. So all ayes.
Before you take the vote, can I point out, while our policy does allow us for board members to participate remotely, for them to take a vote, there's standards by the New York State about that they need to be visible to the public to take the vote and participate. And if that, I would like to have a ruling on that before we take the vote.
If anybody from the public would like to come down, I have Brendan on my screen, and watch him raise their hand, please do so. Ayes? Aye? Richard, Bass? No? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 ayes. No? 1 no from Christian. And any abstentions? We have 2 abstentions for Richard and Bass. That motion is carried 5 to 1 to 2. Next item on our consent agenda, number 15. Can I have a motion?
So moved. Sorry.
Have a motion. Do we have a second? Second. We have a second. I just wanted to pull this out always just to understand. Obviously, this is based on the budget for this year, which we voted upon. This is just how the rubber meets the road, and just wanted Harvey to give the board, especially in the fact that we have 2 new board members, the 30, 60, 90-second version here, whatever it may be, of what this entails.
Sure. So this is required by law. We have to, the board as a whole has to set the rates themselves based on the tax levy that was identified as part of the budget process. It's worth knowing that the tax levy as a whole increased from last year by 1.72%. But as you might note in the memo that I put out to the board, the increases to each of the 3 municipalities, because remember, we have Cornwall, we have parts of New Windsor, and parts of Woodbury. The rates for each of those respective municipalities is actually under 1%. And you may ask, well, if we increase the pot 1.72%, why is the tax increase for the individual taxpayers less than that? And the reason is for two pieces. One is the actual pool of assessed value has grown. Okay, that grows typically every year, at least in my experience in this community. Equally, one of the variables in this calculation is what they call the equalization rate, and all that does is try to equalize the value of a property in each of the 3 municipalities that we're part of. So that a home in Cornwall is of the same value as a home in New Windsor. So with that said, the reason that this came down is because of, the largest part is because of the assessed values in these 3 municipalities as a whole have increased. They've increased pretty good rate. Consequently, it's favorable to the taxpayer, and the rate is actually less than that 1.72.
Thank you, Harvey. So just a great note to our taxpayers. When you think about your tax bill holistically between the town and the village and the school district, that when you vote for yes for a budget in the spring at a 1.72 tax percent, that your tax percent as a homeowner is actually less than that if we add more ratables in our community. So when the town approves new buildings and those buildings pay taxes, that helps lower the tax burden on our homeowners. So just important to note. Can I have a vote for this? All ayes. Christian?
I don't think it's appropriate to advocate for town policy using school district resources.
Thank you. I don't believe I advocated for a policy. I explained the fact that when ratables in the town increase, that a homeowner's tax bill increases. That's a factual statement, not advocating for a policy. All aye votes, please vote aye.
Aye.
Brendan votes aye. That is 8 ayes, so I will not take the nays and the abstentions because we were there. That
Jim,
takes us.
Jim, if I could just add, before the end of the meeting tonight, there is an actual physical tax warrant that I need to get a majority of the taxpayers to sign. So before you run out tonight, if you could, just look for me and I'll have the paper. Thank you.
Taxpaying board members?
What? Board members.
Board members, thank you.
Harvey needs signatures from board members
Yeah.
after the meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our consent agenda. Brings us to item F here, the non-consent agenda, discussion of BOE committees. Part A here is discussion of existing BOE committees. We obviously discussed at the last meeting what those committees were. We took preferences from all the board members to go ahead and seat our committees. I emailed those out to the board last week. I emailed those to Linda today. I don't know, they don't look like they made the printed version, but I would assume that they came through on board docs. Sorry, I just need to go back here on my agenda. Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so thank you, Linda. So we do have under each committee, got it, you added it to the description in addition to not replacing. Perfect, thank you. So everybody, if we look at the existing committees, we have members and chairs on there. So that is item A there. What's that? No, it's here. I just didn't see it on the page. Okay. And then we've got, so we have a separate agenda item for delegates to Orange County School Board's NISPA Legislative Liaison. So all of these board members are filled. I will, in past practice, we have voted on these as a board. I don't think that's actually necessary. Legally speaking, I think these can certainly be filled at the pleasure of the president and the vice president, but I also have found a good practice to make sure that everybody agrees and has buy-in. I didn't receive any comments back from email. The committees were filled based on preferences that were sent out via email, so I'm going to assume that everybody's happy if they have not commented on their committees. So if I can get a motion to just take a vote to approve the members and chairs listed here for our existing committees.
So moved.
Second? Second? Okay, all ayes for approving these committee assignments? Aye. Okay, Brendan says aye, so that is 8 ayes. Again, no need to take nays because that is 8-0. It says the next item here is discuss additional BOE committees. I'm going to actually circle back to that, and let's discuss first, since we've already seated these, the OXPA, NISPA, and Legislative Liaison. So OXPA, we have Christine Diaz, and then we had a lot of volunteers for the alternate. So I guess I'll just take, if we can pencil in here, who wants to be the alternate to the Orange County School Boards Association? I had multiple people via email said they would do it. Does anybody want to step up here in public? And Christian, everybody good with that? Okay, so we're going to put down Christian Brunelli as our OXPA delegate. NISPA delegate is Bass, and we're going to go ahead and take an alternate. Bass did a tremendous job there, being our delegate in that long NISPA meeting, going over all of their legislative priorities and voting on our district's behalf. Does anybody want to volunteer to be the alternate? Okay, Tiffany, everybody good with that? Seeing lots of yes, great. Legislative liaison, again, I had lots of, so I put 2 down, I put Christian and Tiffany down there. And last year we had 2 people go up to Albany for that lobbying day. And I've seen other districts send 2 people up, so I just put both down there.
Jim, just a comment on this. Since we are doubling the staffing to this, one of the things suggested would also to create a local government liaison position, and I think rolling it into this role would be appropriate and useful. I know that some of our local governments have talked about having a liaison to the school district, and that would just give them a point person just to make sure that information is passed on.
Yeah, I mean,
and I think there are people in the position that have the ability to, and, connections to make that and facilitate that.
Sure. In my mind, actually, that the legislative liaison is not just to Albany for that lobbying day, but also is the liaison to our local
Municipalities.
Municipalities, and also to our state assembly member and state senator. If we need to liaise with Mr. Ekus or Mr. Skoufis, it's my.
I'm only, but the language is legislative, so, obviously, they're not all legislatures. So my point is, you think you've answered the question that it's just a general purpose? And
Yeah.
I think that would be a good path forward.
Fantastic. So I think, okay, so that's item 2 there. So we've just gone and appointed all of those on item 2. Can I have a motion to vote on those?
So moved.
We have a motion. Second. Ayes.
Aye.
We have 8 ayes for that. Number 3 here, discussion to appoint representative to the following district-wide committees: DEI, Health and Safety and Security, and Professional Development. Let's flip the page here. So we have Richard Schaffner for Health, Safety, and Security, Tiffany Galliano for Professional Development, and then DEI I left blank and said we're going to do that at the meeting because I think I had 6 or 7 people volunteer for that, and obviously that's overkill. I don't know, Terry, if you want to discuss, I know you're looking for some changes there, and to not have a 60, 70-person committee, but to have an executive committee, and because it's actually not clear to me on where we want board representation here. So if you want to discuss that, and then we'll discuss who should fill those roles. Thank you.
So 6 would be too much for a steering committee, so you're correct. Yeah. But if 6 board members were interested.
6 board members would also be too much, yes.
So the steering committee is really supposed to be a smaller group that's going to help facilitate the ongoing conversations and the smaller subcommittees for the DEI committee. So my recommendation would keep that number at 2. And then for the additional board members who still have interest, there's still going to be an opportunity when I bring back subcommittee where various board members could participate in those subcommittees based on their interests. So a subcommittee could be around teaching and learning. There could be a subcommittee around parental involvement, things of that nature. So there's still those opportunities as well.
Okay, so we're looking for 2. So who wants to, I know we had just via the email traffic, we had a lot, but I think, some people might not raise their hand right here. So I guess let's just raise a hand and see if the number is still higher than 2.
Jim, just a suggestion, obviously Christine and I served on the DEI committee last year.
You certainly did.
And, obviously I will withdraw, just to reduce the number, and, I think it would be appropriate to give other people an opportunity to serve on the committee.
Thank you for that. Show of hands of people who are interested on the DEI committee. I've got 1 hand, went from 6 to 1. Christine, Brendan, are you going to raise a hand for this or no? You want to give me a thumbs up, thumbs down?
Delay's wild.
Brendan gave a shoulder shrug, thumbs up, so I guess that means if nobody else wants it, I'll take it. I'm going to interpret that. Christian, or do you want to throw your hat back in and say, I only stepped down to open the door? Yeah, if Brendan's going to give me a shoulder shrug, I think we'll appoint Christian and Christine to continue their role there. Does that work for you, Brendan? Thank you. Got it. So we are going to then, for DEI, we're going to have Christian Brunelli and Christine Diaz. Great. So we have those 3 committees here in number 3 filled. Did we do a motion in a second on that before we discussed? Sorry, I can't remember if we moved it and then discussed it. Did we move it? Okay, so let's take a vote then. We're voting on number 3 here for the DEI committee, which would be Brunelli, and Diaz. The Health, Safety, and Security Committee, Richard Schaffner, and Professional Development Committee for Tiffany Galliano. So just voting to ratify the discussion we just had.
So just, Jim, just point of order, because I know letter B under number 1 was.
We're coming back to it.
We're coming back to that.
Yep.
Thank you.
We're coming back to it. I just wanted to fill the seats.
I understand the reason is making sure that, we didn't just move on.
It is not gone and forgotten.
Right.
So, you know what? Let's just take another motion in a second, because I honestly can't remember if we moved it. So we've got a motion. We've got a second. Ayes? We have 8 ayes on that one. So that's number 3. So the next item, number 4, is the code of conduct. So now we'll circle back to number B. Number B, letter B. Letter B under subhead A. A subhead B. Guess it doesn't really matter. Discussion on proposing additional BOE committees. I did not send to Linda what those committees were, so they're not written down there. So off the top of my head, they were curriculum, code of conduct, it was, and also, did we have,
Are we talking about all the ones that were proposed, or all
Yeah.
the ones that we're considering? I think I remember there was a special education committee, there was a professional education policy book club, which was kind of a professional development and to have people read and discuss as a committee. There was a code of conduct committee, and I think there was a district curriculum committee.
Yeah, I
believe
curriculum, code of conduct, special ed, I'm not sure called the
As I said, was it a committee to do something? Was it a committee to basically, kind of, you could say, for board professional development and for...
So, yeah, we have we have board representation on the professional development committee that the district already has. So we have
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Mr. President, does the district have a curriculum committee? Mr. Dade, I guess, would answer that.
Not specifically, so we have a professional learning plan committee, but not a curriculum committee.
My proposal, the curriculum committee, I know is
Can I
something
ask you to-
I discussed, certainly.
I want to let you air that view. I just want to agree on which proposed committees we're going to discuss, and then we'll discuss them. We'll go down the list there. So right now I've got 3. I've got curriculum, code of conduct, and special ed. Do we have
Jim,
anything that we want to add?
A strategic planning committee, but that might be covered by
you.
our board goals.
Yeah, I think we can knock that off right now, and I'll just ask for head nods here. I think that's part of the board goal. We've sent out RFPs. We'll have a discussion as a board if we want to approve those RFPs. If we choose to go ahead with that and select a vendor for an RFP, that we will obviously have a strategic plan committee. I think it's kind of we will have one if we choose to go down that route.
I'm just trying to be comprehensive so we get it done.
That was, yes, I agree. That's in my notes, but I think that's a clear path on there. So, so I've got curriculum, code of conduct, special ed. Well, Tiffany, you had a curriculum comment, so let's open the discussion on curriculum committee, a proposed committee.
Sure. So my proposal for a curriculum committee was not necessarily a board committee, but perhaps a recommendation to administration to have a district curriculum committee for which there's a board representative, similar to the health and safety and professional development. I just wanted to clarify that to be not as a board, in my recommendation. That's just my opinion.
That's certainly a valid part of this discussion is should this be a board committee? Should it be a committee that has membership with other members of the district and not solely a board committee? In addition to, should said committee exist? Other comments on a curriculum committee? I guess what I would like to hear, and I spoke to Ms. Panzanero on this before she went on her trip that she's on right now, so she can't join us. Her sort of, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I will try to do justice in a very short form. Her thought with a curriculum committee would be really to we both agreed that, 98, 99, maybe 99.9% of the curriculum is really kind of mandated by New York State, but her concern was more of how does the board know that that curriculum is being implemented? If we're changing our science discussion, if we're changing our science curriculum, external provider textbooks and materials, as we did a couple years ago, how does the board ensure that those materials have made it into teachers' hands? So I think that was just to raise a concern that she had. Tiffany?
I'm sorry, one more comment.
Yeah.
I was the one that proposed the committee, so one
Yeah.
more comment on that was also to make sure, not that there's a lack of trust, but to have some information on how it's being implemented. And I understand it's probably administration that's interpreting these New York State laws and rules and what the curriculum should be, and I'm fine with that. That's as it should be. But that's why I'm saying a board representative. And I also want to make sure that there's teachers on there that have a voice in how the curriculum is being interpreted and implemented, hence my proposal.
Thank you for that. I know you've got a hand. I'm coming down that way. And I guess I will add as sort of an overarching comment to this discussion on all three of these proposed committees that we may be a half a step ahead by saying we need a committee. So I think your question, Tiffany, is a fantastic question and one that we should ask the administration in a work session. So the board meetings are set up, in the summer we have one meeting per month, but during the meat of the school year, we've got two meetings per month. One is a business meeting, one is a work session. The work sessions are designed to dig in depth to a topic. So if we have a question like that, which I think is of interest to many board members of, how does the rubber meet the road? How do we translate state standards into a curriculum and what's taught to our students in the school? I think a great starting step would be, let's have that in a presentation as a work session. And then we can see after that, okay, does that answer our questions, or do we think that needs ongoing committee work from a board committee? Christian?
Curriculum committees are pretty standard on boards of education. The fact that we don't have one is kind of, we're the anomaly. And while, yes, New York State does put out standards for the required classes, and in some grades, it's more about the implementation. All electives are sui generis to the district. The general process is that when a teacher wants to propose a new class, that class is proposed, it goes to a board committee, they make a recommendation, the board approves it. There are decisions, for example, what foreign languages to offer. Any district can decide what foreign languages they want to offer. So maybe we want to add a foreign language, or maybe reduce our foreign language. That's kind of an issue that I think that the board should take up, and that's responsive to the community interest. There is also, as Eleanor's, or at least as you represent Eleanor's position, which is making sure that the curriculum is being resourced and implemented faithfully to what the intent was. And I think that at least 4 board members expressed some type of interest in serving on the committee. And I think that would be enough to, let's say, create a committee and allow that committee to figure out what its purview is. Because some of the things that would be done by curriculum committee are things that are handled in the visitation committee, but there's also things in addition to that. And so I think I don't think we need to wait. I think we can create a committee, and the committee can decide. And if it's not necessary, like perhaps the scholarship committee or the new member board committee, it can decide to make a proposal or a charter. And if it doesn't get the improvement, it can be dissolved, or it can be suspended. I think that would probably be would be my preferred way going forward on this. And just, I could go on examples of curricular decisions from like adding a gifted and talented program, adding, certain types of enhancements to our curriculum. And I do think in the past, the Cornwall Board of Education has weighed in on that and approved courses. It just hasn't happened, as far as I can tell, in the last 4 or 5 years. And I think that would be a return to form and a return to how most Board of Educations conduct their business.
Yeah, I'll make 2 comments. One, I think that our visitation committee is really what other districts call a curriculum committee, is really how I've seen it. Because our visitation committee was originally, is my understanding, it was before my time on the board, but it was originally founded when we had a change, I believe, in a reading curriculum, and the board wanted to go into the schools and see how that was being implemented. So I think there is some overlap, and I think there are some things that we're talking about curriculum-wise that could be given to the purview of what we call our visitation committee, or possibly we could update the name of our visitation committee to visitation/curriculum, or just change it to curriculum. But just on a process, you said, I think we've got enough interest, so we should just form a committee and they can make up what they do. And that's not a quote. Right. So I will say, from me personally, not as a board president facilitating discussion, but as a board member, my vote on that way of doing it, I would vote no on that committee. And I think what I would propose in response to that, which is similar, will achieve a similar end, but it's just a different way of going about it, is if we have 4 members who want to do it, they can have an ad hoc meeting. You know, I don't think it needs to have a committee title. It can be a proposed committee. Those 4 members can then propose, here's what we think this committee could do. I'm not prepared to vote to open a committee until I know what the purview of that committee is. I'm also not opposed to, if members are interested in forming a committee, for them to get together and propose what they think the purview of that committee would be, if that makes sense. I think it's going to the same place, it's just a different form.
I think we have a difference of opinion, but I think that's why we have democracy.
Bass.
Yeah, on the curriculum committee, I mean, I see it in a way as a body, you know, that can put some enforcement mechanisms on what to teach in the classroom. For instance, like if a course, let's say, is you have to teach a given course, like the state tells you you have to teach this topic. Now, does the teacher have the luxury to say, well, I'm not going to cover chapter 5 and chapter 6, for instance? You know, so when you go down, because like I can give you an example. I recall one time looking at results of Regent exams, and the results came back not good. And I think I heard that we don't cover that topic. Like, why don't we? You know, so like when you have a curriculum committee, I mean, something like that would be handled.
I think that's a good question, and in my mind, that is along the line of Tiffany's query of, let's collect a list of questions that we have on curriculum and have a work session on curriculum and see if we can answer that question there. And then, if we're not satisfied as a board with that answer, set up a committee. That's how I see that question. So I appreciate the question. I just think we should, I guess that was, I did have one thing that I forgot to say in my president's update. I wanted to solicit, and I believe I solicited earlier this summer via email, but if any board member has suggestions for a work session for the upcoming year, please do send them. So this is now a solicitation there. So I think we've got a couple good questions here, and we can flesh out more questions via email to be answered in a work session on curriculum. But to me, that's where that falls. Other comments, curriculum committee? I'm looking at you, Brendan. Do you have a comment? Are you on mute?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I think you might have muted me.
I sure did. You're unmuted.
Okay, now we're caught up. Yeah, I just want to, I actually just want to underscore what you said, because I think that is the approach I would take. I think I'm not against any of these committees. In fact, I can definitely see some form of these committees being established. But we've come into problems in the past, just in my experience being on the board, where we have committees and then there's some confusion about what the committee should be doing, and that becomes a much more difficult problem to solve. I think just having a little bit more diligence up front will allow us to establish this committee with confidence, especially when the committee is working so closely with the administration. We want to be very careful about how we're diverting the administration's time and resources. And a curriculum committee would almost by definition need direct input and time from our administrators and teachers. So I think just having a little bit more due diligence on our side will allow us to proceed in a way that everybody is happy with.
Great, thank you, Brendan, for that comment. Do we have any other comments from board members here?
I have a comment. I mean, curriculum committees are pretty standard. We are not inventing the wheel. I don't think it has affected any district administration of all the districts that have curriculum committees. There is a reason I think that John Hines at our last meeting in his comment asked us to form a curriculum committee, because it does help support the teachers and make sure that it has that. And I think the point about it is that somehow that we're going to create some, some weird monster that's going to somehow upend it is just really not with the common practice of boards of education in New York State, of which there are many. And part of the reason why you need a curriculum committee, as I said, last year, is that when you talk about, let's say, for example, our controversial issues policy, what's in the curriculum, and when you set a standard, it has to be adopted by the elected members of the community, because it's the community standard that determines what is and what's not in the curriculum. It is not an administrative, or it shouldn't be an administrative thing, which is why courts have again and again and again ruled that way, that it has to be. And if the Board of Education does not take a position, then you are basically saying that whatever the teacher decides of how to implement the course, and it's pretty broad, and we can look at, commissioner decision after commissioner decision after commissioner decision on this, it behooves us to have one so that we can take action, or we can establish that standard, or have some type of scrutiny over it, not to, let's say, check in on the teachers, but have a process by which curriculum is adopted, evaluated, proposed, planned, etc. And that's why more than, I'm sure, 90% of the districts, I do know I looked at the 90 in the Hudson Valley, I think 86 or 87 had something called the curriculum committee, and the rest had something that was similar. And I think frankly, it's something that we really should do. And the idea that somehow that we're proposing something that is odd, that something is being proposed odd, is really just not standard practice. And so, I mean, maybe we should, I don't know, try it out and give it, rather than tabling and treating something that we have to investigate.
Thank you.
I just wanted to give the background that was explained to me with regards to visitation, and Megan can correct me if I'm wrong, but visitation was really born out of the introduction of Common Core, which upended districts all across New York and the country. And the intent of visitation was hearing from teachers and staff, with these changes, we need X, Y, or Z to make sure our kids are getting what they need. So the board would go out and look at something like science instruction, and that would be the purpose and intent of their visit, to go into classrooms and observe science, and then meet with teachers to say, what do you need? What can we pass on to the state as we undergo these changes? So I agree with Christian that there's some version in districts. I think that Cornwall took a different take on how that might be best accomplished. So the visitation committee was really supposed to be curriculum focused, teaching and learning focused, and then coming back and reporting out to the board in order to advance what our teachers and students need in the area of reading, aligned to Common Core, or best instruction for students. This is what we saw in classrooms. This is what we heard from teachers. So I think that there should still be some more conversation about the purpose of visitation, how that could best be useful for the district in these very conversations. And then the only second caution I would provide to the board is We'll send you an email with the updated curriculum maps. It's a beast. So if you think that you're going to review all of the curriculum from every content area from K through 12, it's a lot. So all I say is we're here to do right by our students. So bring us what problem we're trying to solve, and we'll surely provide you with the answers, and then we can delve deeper if there's something that we unveil as a committee, individual board members, or the like. So just wanted to make those 2 points.
Thank you, Terry. Tiffany? Christine?
I was going to ask or suggest, can we enrich the visitation committee? If I recall last year, even in the year before, I think it was like I didn't go. People went to the school, they met, they watched, they looked, they took some feedback, but I don't know that anyone went in with like the curriculum in mind, or that wasn't at least discussed at a board level. So as a first step, could we enhance the expectations of the visitation committee to include some prior to discussion about a specific curriculum that we want to be looking at through the district as we go on the visit? And then it can evolve from there, perhaps based on that committee's recommendations and insights. And, you know, if there's somebody that very strongly wanted to be on a curriculum committee but didn't see visitation as such, we can maybe revisit who's on the committee if that's, you know, part of it. I don't know, but this way we're 2 birds with 1 stone.
That's a great suggestion. I have a proposal for a path forward, but I open it for any other additional comments before I make that proposal. Okay, I'm not seeing any. So here's what I'm going to propose. I'm going to propose we work on 2 tracks here. One, and then we'll follow up via email. One track is soliciting questions, such as Tiffany and Bass had, for the board for a potential work session on curriculum. The second track is for those 4 members who are interested in a curriculum committee, that they have a meeting and they begin to define what they think is a curriculum committee. And I think Christine's suggestion is wise, with maybe a lens or a thought process towards, is this something that we see in the purview of a new committee or something that could be rolled into our existing visitation committee, with a potential, you know, name change or update to an existing committee, and adding more to the purview of that committee. So that would be my proposed way forward, and well, I'll follow up with email on that. Next proposed committee here is the Code of Conduct Committee. And I know this suggestion came from you, Christian, so I will open the floor to you, and I'll just ask, as we think about forming this for a committee, my questions would be, what is the problem that we are trying to solve, and how would this committee solve that problem for the district? That's sort of my overarching questions in this area, because I'm not entirely sure on that yet, so I'd like to hear your thoughts there.
So as I've said before, like the code of conduct, I think runs something around 60 to 70 pages. We should make it more than twice as long as any code of conduct in the entire region. And that's not the problem, is the number of pages, but it indicates how the code of conduct is done, which is that it's basically reactive. Something happens, we change some language. Something happens, we change some language. And what you get is an ever-expanding document. And our code of conduct is not, to me, what I would call a workable document, which means there's a table of contents, but there's no pages. So you're asking someone to go through 70 pages to figure out what exactly is in there, and we have different policies for different buildings, and just judging by the inconsistent typefaces and knowing where some of the language came from, there's a lot of copying and pasting. And I think the thing with why we have a code is that a code is actually something that people understand, and therefore it governs and understands the behavior. In the sense, like, this is what we expect, and in a sense we simplify it so that it can be usable to the students, teachers, etc. The reason why I think we need to have a committee is because for a code to have effect, it has to have legitimacy. And to have legitimacy, I think we need input from a lot of community members about the different types of things that, are important to them. And I know there are people tonight that have differences on dress code. And they're both members of our community, and they should have an input into that so that we have not just, in a sense, a changing of this word or that word, but something that, in a sense, creates a principle. And a lot of that, I think, would say the exemplars of a code of conduct have that, because when things are not spelled out, you have, in a sense, some principles that, in a sense, guide to how those things would occur. But then there's a practical issue about how the code of conduct works, which is that, let's say you have school tool, and I'm a teacher. So someone does something transgressive. I write up a referral in school tool. It gets go out to the administrator who did not witness what happened. And in most cases, when someone's breaking the code of conduct, someone's being victimized, which means a student, a teacher, et cetera, someone's not doing something that they're supposed to be doing, and then someone else is treated like that they're somehow the transgressor, or let's just say, like in criminal justice terms, the offender. And then it comes through a criminal justice process, which is that, well, do we know the facts about this offender, and did they offend, and what were the details of that? But then that will be determined, okay, by someone who's distanced from that. And then, of course, if it's a significant penalty, there's going to be an appeal by that parent. And then that parent will say, well, this is too harsh. And then the administrator might say, well, then we'll maybe cut it in half. And then what happens is several things. The first one, the person who's victimized just feels like, I'm waiting for you to do something about the thing that happened to me. And that victimization means that he becomes focused on the person who offended and the facts of the case and the punishment on a deterrence model, the idea that if you put some of these punishments or these sanctions on them that are outlined in the code of conduct, that will somehow prevent that behavior. And, there's a voluminous research on deterrence in criminal justice, including codes of conduct, and they say basically that the size of the punishment is irrelevant, it's the consistency of the implementation. So the point about that is that it leaves people victimized and feeling like they're not well treated, and it leads to a lot of arbitrariness, because what the code of conduct has done is basically expanded the scope of what kinds of sanctions that an administrator can put onto a student. And that actually undermines that, because I don't know if it's going to be a slap on the wrist or the figurative death penalty. And that's left in the hands of, let's say, a person, and that's not what a code is, because a code puts limits on what individual people can do who are in positions of power and supervision. And what happens then to teachers is that they see, hey, I wrote this referral and went to my administrator, it wasn't dealt with. It's like, why am I doing this? And then they resort to doing things inside the class, which means I'm going to deal with this in the class by talking, cajoling, persuading people to do the right thing, but the code of conduct is non-operative. And why I think we need a committee is because we need to, in a sense, start from scratch, come down, decide what our core principles are. There are things that are required because of DASA and state laws, and I think that would lead to a more workable and allow to address issues such as bullying, will allow us to address some of the other issues that people have, and have, let's say, a document that is usable and a document that is effective. And I think also, just from the point of logistics, diverting some of the cases away from, let's say, the administrative path, whether it's some version of a restorative justice where small things are dealt with by groups of students, would reduce the administrative burden and load and free them to do other things. But I think the only way you do that is not by rewriting one section of the code of conduct and let it just keep going on and on. I think you go and you say, look, we need to rewrite this. But the best way to do that is to have a committee that's going to create a document that's usable. And that's why I think we need a committee, and I think that it's something that would take a longer process. And that's why I did not want to do it for this year, but I think over the course of the year, thoughtful people can come together and, let's say, improve some of the things related to social emotional learning, some of the, as you know, the point is what kids are dealing with and some of the issues that are happening in the new generation. And I think that would be something that's worth our time.
Thank you. Comments from other board members? Brendan?
Yeah, Jim. So first of all, I think this is my impulse is that this is a great idea, actually. I think having some input into, the code of conduct will lead us to a stronger place. I do think that whenever we look at establishing new committees, it's just a matter of formalizing it, I think, a little bit better. I think my suggestion last time was misconstrued a bit as saying that if something is new, then we have to be suspicious of it. That's not the case at all. In fact, I think that we're just respecting our own process, respecting the committee, the creation of a committee, more by making it a bit more of a formal process and requiring us to put this in writing and saying, this is what we're trying to accomplish. This is how we're going to do it. These will be the stakeholders. I can't really say I disagree with anything that Christian just said, as far as the goal and very high level stuff, but it's still very high level. And I would just like to see, what does that look like on a practical level? Who are the stakeholders? How often would this committee meet? And then we can actually take a vote, an informed vote as a board as to whether we want to form that committee. So again, it's not about being reflexively against anything new. It's just holding us to a high standard and having more respect for the creation of a new committee.
Thank you, Brendan. Comments from any other board member? Is anybody else interested in proposing, similar to the way of Christian, you said we have 4 people interested in a curriculum committee. It sounds like we've got 2, Christian and Brendan. Is there anybody else here who would volunteer to have a meeting there to lay out a little bit more what that might entail before we come back to the full board? Richard? So we'll follow up on email on that and have you guys get together and get us a little more there. I will say, my thought process as a board member is I agree with quite a bit of what you said, Christian, but in an ideal, I think we just have finite resources of what we deal with here. And if we took the code of conduct from 60 pages and made it 20 and there was no copy and pasting and everything was written perfectly and there were headings and all of those issues were fixed, I don't know that it would make an appreciable difference in how discipline is handled in this district. In my experience as a board member, building and central administration is very consistent and thoughtful in the way that discipline issues are dealt with. And I'm not sure that if we undertook the work to do this, that it would make a noticeable difference. That's me personally speaking. So I think we need to think as a board before we take a vote to approve this committee. What resources are we taking away from other areas, and what's the improvement there? That's my thought. So I would ask for the 3 of you, and we'll kind of follow up as a whole board via email, but the 3 of you to have a meeting and sort of outline this a little bit more, and we can bring this back up at our next meeting. Tiffany?
Just quickly, I agree with what Jim stated. I would also point out that the discussion of the victim and the aggressor and the comparison to the criminal justice system, which I don't think is the greatest comparison, but I get where you were going with it. Every student is afforded their due process right, and that's not going to change. And I just don't think that having a committee to make it prettier and pagiate and reduce the number of pages is going to ultimately change the way that discipline is handled in the district. My 2 cents.
Okay. Special ed as a proposed committee. I do not recall who proposed this. Did you propose? Does anybody remember who proposed this? Does anybody want to be the proponent of this, or does it die before we even discuss it?
I was one of the 2.
Okay.
But I will take this one since I think I propose more than anyone else. I think a special education committee would be useful because I think there are concerns and there are issues in the district, and I think that the questions we asked last year raised a lot of questions, and I think these questions and concerns continue. And I think that we need to be, this is not replacing the Committee on Special Education or the Committee on Preschool Special Education, and I think people have made that point, and that's not what it is. Special education is not just for students who struggle, but also students who need a different type of educational program, and I think that it is something that requires our attention. I'm not going to go into specific examples of individual parents and concerns and things of that sort. But part of it is also just, as I said earlier, I think in July and June, when we talked about the Special Education Committee in the board meeting, is that there are some decisions to make about what capacity we want as a district, because otherwise what happens is that students don't have, we basically say, we are going to give this person a service, but it's going to be by an outside provider. And that, well, we're not a therapeutic institution, so we can't handle what might describe a mood disorder, which should be perhaps something that you can do within a school framework, and schools do. And I think those are decisions about how to best use our resources, and also to address some of these concerns, because there's a long history of them. When you take special education, there's a case study on Cornwall about how Cornwall denied a student lost a job because Cornwall said that a long time ago that they had their diploma and they did not get it. And that's something that's taught about us. Cornwall was the respondent on the rights of a student for an extended school services during an extended school year, because we refused it, and then we were sued, and hey, now it's case law, and you see Cornwall Central School District as the district that is the poster child for that. I think that's a reputation, and frankly, it's not just a reputation, it's a practice that we really should be giving more attention, and I think that's why, and I won't speak for Richard, why he thought it should be part of the board goals. And I don't think it's as common, but I think it's something that would be useful and helpful to us, and I think that we have people in the community and people on the board who are concerned about this, and I think it deserves some specialized attention. So that would be my pitch for that.
Christine?
I don't disagree, Christian. I do think there's a need for some attention on this, and I think I've heard from teachers, parents, I've had my own experience. I think there's room for improvement, or at least for better communication and understanding why we might not offer certain services here or why we might go outside. There's such a fine line, again, and I know you're not suggesting this, but I'm just saying in general with, confidentiality, and, you heard my side of the story when I came before you as a public person, not as a board member, but, there's the other side of the story too, which is the school, and you didn't necessarily hear that. Now, of course, I think my side was right, but I'm just being fair in that, there are two sides. So I guess the bottom line for me is I agree. I don't know if a committee is the way to do this. I don't know what the answer is. And I'm behind whatever we can do to make the experience of our parents and our students that fall into this category a more, where they feel more supported, and that they're getting services that they need, all of the above. But I don't have the answer. I'm just sharing my opinion, and I'm not sure committee is the route, but I don't have a better option. So.
I'll echo your sentiment. I think I'll speak for the board in that we all want to see improved outcomes for our special education students. It's something that's important to all of us on this board. It's just a very difficult issue to handle at a board level, as Christine said, with so many confidentiality and other issues. So one thing I'll throw out for discussion is, I know there's a parent, and we currently don't have a special education PTO, PTA, whatever you want to call it. I'm aware that there is a parent who's starting that. And potentially something that we want to do would be have a board, liaison to that, as a way to just really improve communication between parents and the district and the board, and really give everybody more information. I think that would be a place to start. Again, I echo Christine's sentiments of I'm just not sure what a standing committee, what actions they would take. I think we all want improvements, and I think that's, again, it's kind of falling into the category of the other two of let's reconvene via email and have some people raise some hands and see if we can't flesh out what that might look like.
So,
Christian?
Jim, I think there are many ways forward, and you proposed some good ones, and I think that the issue is not about having a particular forum, but addressing the substance of the issue.
Yeah.
I would just suggest that, Lakeland Central School District has had a longstanding board special education committee. And I would say one of the things that came out of that and why it's been there is because back in the 1980s, Lakeland was the first district to mainstream a student with Down syndrome. And when that was very abnormal, and at a time when, special education students were basically put in the closet, literally and figuratively. And it took a lead on that, and they run a program that provides special education service not just to their district, but to surrounding districts to this day, because they made a commitment a long time ago to that. And it might be, if there's interest, to ask them what they did and why they think it's important and what their framework is and whether that's appropriate for us.
I would happily work with you to reach out to that committee. I think that's a fantastic idea. I think we're all in agreement that we want to push this ball forward. It's just a matter of form, as you said. So I think there's a couple of good ideas that have come out of this, and we'll reconvene about email too and get that. So I think that ends our discussion on proposed committees. Let's find the right paper here. Next action item here is number 4, adoption of the 24-25 CCSD Code of Conduct. Can I get a motion? We've got a motion. Second? Second. Any discussion on item 4, adoption of the Code of Conduct? Okay, all the ayes? Aye. Okay, we have 8 ayes, so that motion carries. The next item on our agenda is item G, recognition of visitors. So again, repeat the same ground rules as before, but if anybody would like to come speak, welcome you to the microphone. Please state your name. Thank you.
Can you hear me? It's very loud. Rana Liebert, I want to commend you all for spending so many late hours at these meetings, because I'm having trouble staying alert, so I can only imagine how it feels for you. I just had a question about the board goals, the board and superintendent goals set for this year. First, I want to commend the board, because I know in years past, the superintendent goals have been voted on before the board goals have been developed, and that always struck a lot of people as kind of a backwards process. So I was really happy to see that both of them were developed simultaneously this year. My question is probably really simple. I don't know if there's maybe an easy answer to it, but I was wondering why the superintendent's goals weren't set up just to implement the board's goals. It seems strange that there are separate priorities, and my understanding has always been that the board sets goals and policies, and the administration implements them, and the superintendent, of course, would be, the head of that initiative. So it seems like with two different sets of priorities that maybe you're hamstringing your own goals. So obviously for this year, that is the way it is, but for the future, I would consider having the superintendent's goals more aligned as a kind of directive to implement the board's goals. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? There's no back and forth between the board, as you know, but I'll just, a factual rejoinder here. I think that there's been ample comment by both the board and the administration that the process that we currently have is flawed. We all really want to at least explore, and that's the number one board goals, a strategic planning process where the board goals and administration goals would fall out of that overarching multi-year plan that's an area where I think many on this board want to get to. It's our #1 board goal this year. So hopefully you'll see continued improvements in there, but thank you for your comment. With no other public comments, we will move on to number H here, closing comments from the BOE, and we'll start with Carl.
I just wanted to say, you know, I was happy about all the work that's being done, and we're at from there. That's it.
Thank you. Brendan, you want to closing comment?
Thank you for Jim for facilitating what has been my strangest board meeting in my almost 6 years on the board. But other than that, I will put an end to the awkwardness of everyone hearing me speak through a computer and just wish everyone a good night.
Thank you. We'll start at the end and come work our way back in. Christian.
So in our last August meeting, I talked about how happy I was by some of the people I saw on the substitute teacher list, because I know them and I knew them to be high-quality people and people that I happy that are exposed to our children. And it's a little bit sad, but a lot of those names that I recognized last year are not on our sub list this year. And just, I'm sure there were legitimate reasons, but I just want to talk about the importance of substitute teachers and why it's important, I think, to listen to them. And I just wanted to talk briefly about my own experience. And way back when I was starting my teaching career a long time ago, I was in upstate New York in Williamsville School District, and their process of hiring their subs was basically more rigorous than I think what most people hire for probationary teachers. And they basically put you through the ringer. They made you do demonstration lessons. They put you through multiple levels of interviews. And it's because they, and it was kind of surprising because that's not how typically it was done. And so I became a sub there. And I had a very good experience because I would sub in this high school, and no later than second period, the assistant principal would be down in my room, and he would ask, "What do you need?" And if I said anything, he would literally run out of the room, and within 5 minutes, I had exactly what I need to be successful that day. And at the end of the year, I got my first teaching job, and I went to him. I just want to say, look, kudos to you because this is not normal, and I really appreciate. And I just said, not everyone treats substitutes like this. And he said, everyone who comes in contact with our students is important, and my job is to make sure that they have what they need. And I thought that was just probably one of the best things I've ever heard from an educational leader. And then later, because in my parish, the former superintendent of that district happened to be a parishioner in the same parish, and had a conversation with them, and they talked about, a long conversation. But when I mentioned this, he basically said, my basic philosophy, and this is probably very Catholic, he said, I think about how Pope Gregory the Great described his papacy. And the phrase was service avorum Dei. The Pope is a servant of the servants of God. And I can't say that that's probably why that culture existed in that school district. And when you look at who are the substitutes, they're retired teachers, they are young teachers who haven't, starting their careers, and their parents. And they're really important because what they do is that they bring an outside set of eyes on things, and they notice things that kind of like a fish doesn't notice the water. The substitutes who are there maybe for one day can probably tell you what classes are going well and what classes are not going well. They can tell you about hey, why are you doing this? Or this thing that everyone is taking for granted. And it's particularly important to listen to people who are kind of not at the top of the power pyramid, but at the bottom of the power pyramid, because they often point out the things you need to focus your attention on. And they're not the only people, but they are one class of people that I think that sometimes people wonder, why can't we find subs anymore? And it's pretty clear why that is if you're in a school every day. And it's because they're treated like disposable people. They are treated sometimes they're like a babysitter, and they're not expected. And some of the best comments I've had on my teaching practice have been by substitutes. And it's because they come into my room and they tell me how my students behave when I'm not there. And that tells me whether I set up my classroom and expectations correctly. And I just think that, this is something that is going to become more important We talk a lot about shortages in teaching and educators, and that might be where we should start.
Microphone. Thank you, Christian. Bass.
Thanks, Jim. Very quickly, my comments are going to be very short. Just to say that I'm looking forward to a very successful new school year for everybody, student, teachers, staff, and for us board members too. I can tell you how my kids are excited about kind of, like we're almost done with the summer here, and every day they ask me, when are we going to get the school supply list? Where are we going to know who our teachers are? And today I got an email with the school supply list, and I printed it, gave it to them. They were very excited. So I believe everybody is excited about the new school year, and I wish everybody success.
Thank you, Bass. Richard.
Thank you. I'm going to keep it brief because we've been here a while, but I want to thank everyone who came out to speak and to attend the meeting. I know most people stuck it out till the very end, or the last few minutes. And I just want to wish everybody luck in continuing to prepare for a successful school year. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Tiffany.
Thank you all so very much for coming. Your voices are important. We value what you have to say. And thank you for, as Richard said, sticking it out till nearly the end.
Thank you. Christine.
I just share the same sentiments about encouraging folks to come, share your thoughts, share your ideas. We're here as of service to all of you in the community. For the fellow board members, I just wanted to draw your attention to an email I sent earlier asking you for retreat topics. Again, to be of service to you, giving your opinion and your ideas is helpful. And Bash, you brought up one of my favorite hobbies, school supply shopping. I love getting new pens. It's like a thing, so exciting for all of us. Have a great week.
Thank you, Christine. And I'll just, Bass, you just really made me pull out my calendar and go, wow, we don't have, as a board, a collective body here. Our next meeting is after back to school. It's after the first day of school. So enjoy every drop of your last three or so weeks of summer here, everybody. Wishing everybody, since we won't be meeting as a group before that, a great back to school for not just our students, but our staff as well. So looking forward to that. That comes to the end of our comments there. Next item here is executive session if needed. I would like to propose an executive session for a matter related to their particular person and their actions. Can I have a motion? Can I have a second?
Second.
Ayes. Okay, we've got 8 ayes across the board here. So we will adjourn for the public here. We will adjourn for an executive session. There will be, just for everyone's knowledge, there will be no business conducted after the executive session. All we will do is come back out and adjourn the public meeting. So thank you all for joining us. I would ask everybody before we retire to executive session to see Harvey and get him the signatures that he needs. And we'll get those signatures and then we'll retire to executive. Thank you.